YouTube, it's me, Bergie, and I am filming right after my April 2019 reading wrap-up, my May 2019 reading wrap-up, in the hopes that I can get these out pretty quickly. So, let's just get into this. This is another reading wrap-up that I actually have the stats, or most of the stats prepared, so I'll go into those very quickly before going into the actual books I've read. In May of 2019, I read a total of 10 books, which equals 2,841 pages. Out of those 10 books, 6 were ones that I already owned, while 4 were ones that I borrowed. 5 of these books were rereads, and I ended up finishing 2 series in this month. Now, as for the authors, 2 were written by males and 8 were written by female authors, which is pretty strange. Usually it's a lot more even between the male and female authors, but if it was gonna go one way, I'd rather it go in favor of females because I tend to read more male books, so I'd rather it go the other way if I am going to disrupt the balance. Now, as for genres, I read 1 sci-fi, 1 suspense, 1 thriller, 5 contemporaries, and 2 fantasy. So this month was kind of strange because my most read genre was not fantasy as usual, but rather contemporary, which is like one of my least read genres. So that was different for me, and I'll explain it in a second. As for reading levels, I read 4 adult, 4 young adult, and 2 middle grade. For rating, I read 5 5-star books, which was amazing, but again, that kind of explains the contemporary thing, and I'll get into that. And I read 4 4 stars and 1 3 star. So kind of the opposite of my April reading month. I mostly read 5-star books. So with those statistics out of the way, let's get into the actual books that I read. First up is Necessity by Joe Walton. This is the 3rd and final book in Joe Walton's Thessaly trilogy that I've been enjoying. I thoroughly love the 1st and 2nd book, but I'm sad to say that I didn't enjoy this as much as the previous books. Don't get me wrong though, I still gave this an A-, and therefore I still enjoyed it quite a lot, but it just went in a direction that I didn't really care for and was kind of disjointed from the feel of the first 2 books. So pretty much it went in a too science fiction-y kind of direction for me, and I'm not going to go into it more because this is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy, so I don't want to give spoilers. But again, I do plan on eventually making a whole series review for the series, and I will touch on it a little bit more in that. Anyway, I still do recommend the series, and I'm very interested in reading more of Joe Walton's books. Next up, I read Roadwork by Richard Bachman, aka Stephen King. So I picked up this short story since I already had the bind-up of Bachman's short stories. I really enjoyed this one because it commented on social issues without being overly vulgar, which I feel like is something that never happens in Stephen King's books. He usually can sit with a lot of disgusting things or like overly vulgar stuff, but this didn't have it that much. Additionally, it dealt with topics that I'm somewhat dealing with, though not exactly in the same situation, and I actually talk about this a little bit more, or my situation, in my update video, and it kind of goes along with this. Although, unfortunately, I'm in a much harder spot than I was back in May, and I see myself going the way that the main character in Roadwork did, going completely batshit crazy because of these circumstances. Hopefully I won't go as dark as he does, but yeah, it's not looking good for me. But anyway, in this we follow George Bart Dawes as his life is basically falling apart in every way possible, whether it be family, home, career, all of that is just imploding. And again, can relate, unfortunately. My only issue, apart from this hitting a little too close to home, was that it had some editorial errors, which is a pet peeve of mine and makes me dislike books that are not proofread or not proofread well, and because of that, I did give it a B-. I then read the final short story in this Richard Bachman bind-up, and that was The Running Man. So I think this was my favorite one. I'm not sure. I don't remember them that well now to actually definitively say which one was my favorite, but at the time, this one I think was my favorite. This is a somewhat dystopian thriller where the world just sucks, which is common for dystopians. So to try to get money for his family, the main character, Ben Richards, signs up to be on the #1 reality TV show called Running Man, which is, again, something that I've considered, not going on to this TV show because it doesn't exist, but I've thought to get out of my current predicament to get on or apply to go on to my favorite reality TV show because you get money easily that way. But don't worry, I've thought against it. But anyway, basically the contestant needs to survive for a certain number of days from those literally hunting for him. I feel like there are other stories that are like this, but I can't remember what they're called. But I did really enjoy this, and it might be my favorite again of the 4 so far. But I was a bit confused as to why Rage is not being reprinted when this story, which has a 9/11 World Trade Center-like scene in it, is still printed. And I guess that's another issue for like why Stephen King decided to stop printing Rage. Like, there are a lot of his stories, and especially just in this collection, that are just so disgusting and vulgar and just like relevant that I don't see why he chose to do that one instead of this. I don't know, but I did still enjoy it and I gave it a B-. Okay, so I think the next handful of books were rereads. Yeah, I continued on with reading the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants books. So first up, The Second Summer of the Sisterhood by Anne Brashers. So after devouring the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, I absolutely had to continue with this reread. It's been quite a number of years since the last time I picked up these books, and I think it was in my late teens, so again, a while. And I'm happy to say that these continue to stand up. I love these girls and their friendship so much. It's just very heartwarming, and I love it. I wish I had friends like that. So obviously I gave this an A+. Unsurprisingly, I then picked up Girls in Pants, The Third Summer of the Sisterhood by Anne Brashers, gave it an A+. Loved it. Then Forever in Blue, The Fourth Summer of the Sisterhood by Anne Brashers, ditto, A+. And then I read Sisterhood Everlasting by Anne Brashers. So this is the 5th book set and written years after the main quartet was written and set. And I've only read this book one time before. So I haven't like reread this book as much as the other ones, so I didn't really remember a lot that had happened. And upon reading this, I bawled my eyes out again, so it made me very emotional. And while I hate how this book started because it hurt me so bad in the feels, I absolutely love how this concluded this series of the Sisterhood books. I totally would recommend this series. I think it's just, you can learn a lot from them, especially as a teenage girl. I think it has a lot of worthwhile topics that it discusses, and so again I gave this an A+, which is no surprise. Talking about something not related to Anne Brashers, I read Marilu is Everywhere by Sarah Elaine Smith. So this was an ARC I had gotten from my ARC book club thing that I've been participating in, and I have to say that I'm not having good luck, or did not have good luck when picking books for the most part. I think most of them I did not like, and this was no different. I have to say this book confused me, as I have no idea why it was written. In this, a girl from a poor family whose parents aren't really around decides to take the place of a missing rich older girl. There really was no plot, character development, or interesting setting, so like I said, I have no idea why this book exists. Maybe I'm just dumb and didn't get the literariness from it, but there was nothing that made me like it at all or see why it was written. And even that, the writing style wasn't even that great. And apart from confusion, I have no thoughts on this book, like just nothing. It did not affect me at all, so because of that I gave it a C-. I then picked up Princess Academy by Shannon Hale. I had first picked this book up years ago, probably when I was in elementary school, and absolutely loved it despite thinking it left off very unsatisfyingly. Then I found out that the reason why I was unsatisfied with the ending of this book was that it is part of a series and I just never continued on. So in order to continue on, I decided to reread this book. And again, kind of like the Sisterhood series by Anne Brashers, I wanted to see if this book still held up, and I have to say I still really enjoyed it. This follows Miri, a teenager from a quarrying mountain village who finds herself and her fellow teenage village girls swept away to attend a princess academy, as one of them will wed the prince. That's pretty much the most I can summarize this book without giving any spoilers, but while this is definitely intended for a younger audience, I still absolutely loved it, and I gave it a B. It might not have held up as much as the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants books did, but I still enjoyed it. And finally, for May, I read Palace of Stone by Shannon Hale. This is the second book to the series, so this was the one that I never read before. So I'm not going to go into it too much because it is a sequel, but I will say that while I didn't enjoy this as much as the first book, it was still a good read and I gave it a B. I will say though that after having stewed with this series, because spoiler, I did finish the third and final book in the series in June of 2019, I didn't really enjoy it as much. So I think overall I would lower the series to more of a C rating rather than being the B that I've given it. But yeah, it's still good. It's not as great as it doesn't have as great of a lasting impact as I would have liked. Those were all of the books that I read in May. I think I will be filming June's video right after this, so even though you won't be seeing it right after this video, because I'll post it a little bit like a distance away, so that way it's not just reading wrap-ups. You can expect it very soon because I'm filming it right after this, and it'll be short, I'll tell you, because I was very busy during the summer months. But yeah, so I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.